The moment the young cashier at the pharmacy pressed a folded receipt into my palm and whispered, "Please don't take the blue ones tonight, ma'am," I knew the quiet life I had rebuilt after my husband's funeral was about to come apart at the seams. The Shoppers Drug Mart sat at the corner of Elgin and Bank, the same one I had been walking to every second Wednesday for the past 3 years, since the prairie winds first started carrying the chill that meant Ottawa was sliding back into winter. I liked that pharmacy because the pharmacist never rushed me, and the girl behind the counter, Priya, her name tag said, always remembered that I preferred the paper bag over the plastic one. That afternoon in early November, I was there with my son Daniel and his wife Brianne. They had insisted on driving me, saying the sidewalks were getting icy and they did not want me slipping again. Brianne stood beside me, too close, her perfume sharp enough to make my eyes water, while Daniel chatted with the pharmacist at the consultation window about a refill he wanted added to my file. I had not asked him to add anything. I had not given him permission to speak to my pharmacist at all. Outside the storefront window, the gray Rideau River sky pressed low over the rooftops of the Glebe neighborhood, and a thin sleet had started to tap against the glass. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly above the cough drop display, and I held my purse tight against my ribs the way my mother once taught me to do on the streetcar in Toronto decades ago. When Priya slid my prescription across the counter, she did not meet Brianne's eyes. She met mine. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand, and she tucked something beneath the folded pharmacy leaflet before pushing the whole package toward me. "Everything is ready for you, Mrs. Whitfield," she said, her voice perfectly level, perfectly professional. But as I reached for the bag, she leaned in just far enough that her next words landed between only the two of us. "Please don't take the blue ones tonight. I'll explain later. Please." Then she turned to the next customer as if nothing had happened. My son had not heard. Brianne had been looking at her phone. I slid the bag into my purse with hands that felt suddenly cold, and I did not open it in the car, though I wanted to. Daniel drove me home through Centertown, chatting about the snow that was forecast for the weekend, telling me again how worried he was about me living alone in the old Sandy Hill townhouse his father and I had bought in 1979. Brianne turned around from the passenger seat and asked, in that too soft voice she used only with me, whether I had thought any more about the retirement residence in Canada. "It's beautiful, Mom," she said. "They have a sunroom. They do Sunday tea." I told her I would think about it, because I had learned that was the easiest way to end the conversation. When they dropped me at my door, Daniel offered to come in and help me organize my medications on the kitchen counter, the way he had started doing every second week. I told him I was tired. I told him I could manage. I watched their Lexus pull away into the sleet, and only then did I let myself breathe. Inside, with the deadbolt turned and the chain set, I emptied the pharmacy bag onto the kitchen table. The pill bottles rolled out in their familiar amber plastic, along with the leaflet. Tucked inside the folded paper was a small square of lined notebook paper, the kind a student would tear from a school binder. The handwriting was hurried but clear. It read, "I work the night shift Thursday. Meet me behind the loading dock at 9:40 p.m. Come alone. Do not tell your son. Do not take any pill with a blue coating until we speak. I am sorry. I should have said something months ago." I read it 3 times. Then I set it down on the Formica table and pressed my palms flat beside it, and I listened to the radiator tick on in the front hall, and I listened to the house settle the way old Ottawa row houses do when the temperature drops, and I listened to my own heart behaving badly inside my chest. I had been widowed for 3 years. My husband Harold had passed from what the coroner ruled a sudden cardiac event in his sleep, right here in this house, in our bed, and I had found him in the morning already cold. Daniel had been the one to handle the arrangements. Daniel had been the one to sit with me at the funeral home on Somerset Street. Daniel had been the one to quietly move my accounts to a joint arrangement at the RBC branch on Bank Street. For my safety, he said, because men like the ones who called about extended warranties would try to take advantage of a grieving woman. I had let him. I had been so tired. Harold had always handled the money, and when he was gone, the thought of learning all of it alone made me want to lie down and not get up. Now I was looking at my pill bottles and noticing, for the first time really noticing, that the pink capsule I had been taking for my blood pressure for 7 years was gone from the row. In its place were small round tablets with a soft blue coating. The label said the same medication. The dosage was the same, but the pills were different. And Priya, who had worked behind that counter longer than my husband had been dead, had looked at me like a woman watching someone walk toward the edge of a dock in the dark. Thursday was 26 hours away. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the wing chair Harold had reupholstered for me the winter before he died, and I watched the streetlight throw pale patterns across the hardwood floor, and I thought about the last 18 months. Small things that had not added up, that I had told myself were just the fog of grief. The way I could no longer find the title deed to the house in the filing cabinet where it had always lived. The way my bank statements stopped arriving in the mail, and when I asked Daniel about it, he said he had switched me to paperless to save the environment. The way I had started forgetting little things, appointments, names of old friends, whether I had already eaten breakfast, and how Daniel had begun mentioning in front of Brienne, in front of my doctor at the walk-in clinic, in front of the neighbor across the fence, that his poor mother was not quite herself anymore. I thought about the afternoon 2 months ago when I had overheard Brienne on the phone in my own kitchen, her voice low, saying, "It's only a matter of time. The doctor is already on board." I had assumed she was talking about a real estate client. I had not let myself think otherwise. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea I did not drink, and I took out my laptop, the one Harold had bought me for my 65th birthday so I could video call my sister in Halifax. I opened the browser, and I looked up the blood pressure medication I had been taking for years, the pink capsule, the one I could still picture clearly in my palm. Then I looked up the small blue tablet that was in the bottle now. The names were almost identical, one letter off. The pink capsule was my antihypertensive. The blue tablet was a sedative used in geriatric care for patients with severe agitation. And the warnings on the 3rd page of the search result made my throat close. In elderly women, in sustained doses, over weeks and months, it caused confusion, memory loss, disorientation, falls. In combination with certain other medications, things I was also being prescribed, things Daniel had been helping me organize, it could cause what the coroner would almost certainly rule a sudden cardiac event in sleep. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark. I did not cry, because crying felt like a luxury from a life I no longer lived in. I thought about Harold, lying cold in our bed, and for the first time in 3 years, I let myself ask the question I had not been allowed to ask. The next morning, I went to the CIBC on Rideau Street, not the RBC where Daniel had moved my accounts. I still had an old savings account at CIBC from before I was married, a little one, with just over $800 in it that I had kept for sentimental reasons, and a safety deposit box that Harold had set up in both our names the year our son was born. I had not opened that box in over a decade. I did not even remember what was in it. But Harold had been a careful man, and something in me, something older than fear, said to go. The teller brought me to the vault. I signed the card, the signature matched. The box was long and gray and heavier than I expected. I carried it to the private room and set it on the table, and I sat for a long minute before I lifted the lid. Inside were documents I had never seen. A second will, dated 8 months before Harold died, witnessed by a lawyer whose name I did not recognize, in Kingston. A sealed envelope with my name on it in Harold's careful printing, a small black flash drive, and a folded letter, also in Harold's hand, dated 6 weeks before his death. I opened the letter first. "Eleanor, my dearest," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I was not able to protect you the way I hoped. I am so sorry. I have known for nearly a year that something is wrong, and I have been afraid, and I have been a coward about telling you, because I kept thinking I would find a way to fix it without breaking your heart. I have failed at that. I am writing this down now, so that if the worst happens to me, you will not be alone with it. Daniel is not the boy we raised. Something has gone wrong in him, or perhaps it was always there and we did not see it, and Brienne has made it worse. They have been planning something, and the plan is you. Please listen to me. Do not trust the pills. Do not trust the joint account. Do not trust the family doctor they have been steering you toward. There is a woman named Maureen Lachance, a retired paralegal, my cousin's widow, who knows everything I know. She lives in Vanier. Her number is on the second page. Call her only from a phone that is not in our house. I love you more than anything I ever built. I am sorry I could not finish the job. Harold." I sat in that little private room at the CIBC with the fluorescent light humming and my husband's voice coming off the page in my hands, and I held the letter against my chest and I let myself shake. For 3 years I had believed he had left me because his heart gave out. For 3 years I had been alone in that house with the man who had made sure of it. I called Maureen from a payphone outside the Rideau Center, the kind of payphone I was surprised still existed in 2024, and she answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for 3 years for the phone to ring. Her voice was steady and low. She told me to come to her apartment in Vanier that afternoon, to take a cab, not my own car, and to bring the flash drive and nothing else. She told me I was not safe at home. She told me Harold had been a good man and a careful one, and that he had made her promise that if I ever reached out, she would not let me down. Her apartment was small and warm, and smelled like her late husband's pipe tobacco, though he had been gone 12 years. She made me tea in a real china cup, and she sat across from me at her kitchen table, and she played the contents of the flash drive on her old laptop. There were photographs of documents, pages of a trust agreement Daniel had been having prepared in Gatineau, across the river where the laws were different, one that would have given him full power of attorney over me the moment a doctor signed a capacity assessment. There were emails between him and Brienne, pulled from a shared cloud account Harold had somehow accessed, in which they discussed, in chilling, matter-of-fact language, the timeline for my deterioration and the valuation of the Sandy Hill property, and whether to sell to the developer who had been circling the block or to hold for another spring market. There was a screenshot of a prescription adjustment request, submitted under my family doctor's login, submitted from Brienne's work computer at the real estate office. There was a scanned copy of my husband's original will, the real one, the one that left everything to me with a specific clause stating that Daniel was to receive nothing if there was any indication of elder abuse or undue influence, a clause Harold had inserted 8 months before he died. The will that had been probated after Harold's death, the one Daniel had handled, was a different document. It was a forgery. It was good, but it was a forgery. Maureen looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. "Eleanor," she said quietly, "your husband did not die of a heart attack. He died because he was about to change everything, and they knew it." I put my tea down because my hands were not steady enough to hold it. That evening I went back to my house, because Maureen said I had to, because if I ran now, Daniel would know something was wrong, and whatever he had planned would accelerate. I had to play the part of the confused widow for one more night. I took no pills. I poured the blue ones down the kitchen sink and replaced them in the bottle with sugar pills Maureen had given me, broken up candy from her own cupboard that looked close enough in the dim light of a bathroom cabinet. I ate the sandwich she had packed for me, because I could not trust anything in my own fridge. I locked my bedroom door, which I had never done in 45 years of living in that house. And at 9:40 the next night, I told Daniel on the phone that I was going to bed early, and I walked 3 blocks to Elgin and took a taxi to the back of the Shoppers Drug Mart, and Priya met me by the loading dock in her gray hoodie and her winter boots, and she cried when she saw me. She was 26. She had been filling my prescriptions for 2 years. She told me that 4 months earlier, a man she did not know had come into the pharmacy and spoken to the overnight pharmacist alone, and soon after, my prescription had been quietly changed in the system, but the physical bottle still said my old medication. She had noticed the mismatch 3 weeks ago. She had been too frightened to say anything because the overnight pharmacist was her supervisor and she was on a work permit, and she had a younger brother in Brampton depending on her paycheck. But that afternoon, watching my son speak over me at the counter like I was furniture, watching my daughter-in-law study the diamond on her own hand while Priya handed me what she knew was wrong, something inside her had broken. She had written the note in the back stockroom with shaking hands. She told me she was so sorry. She told me she did not know if it would be enough. I put my arms around that young woman on the cold concrete behind a drugstore loading dock in Ottawa in November, and I told her she had saved my life, and that was the truth. The next 2 weeks moved very fast. Maureen put me in touch with a lawyer in Kingston who had known Harold, a woman named Catherine Tremblay, who took one look at the flash drive and the bank records and the pharmacy note and told me plainly that we had enough to act. We filed an emergency motion to freeze the joint account. We filed a police report with the Ottawa Police Service Elder Abuse Unit, and the constable who took my statement, a woman my age with kind eyes, told me she saw this more often than I would believe, and almost no one ever came forward. We worked with the College of Physicians to review my doctor's prescribing record, and it turned out he had been Daniel's university roommate, a fact I had not known. We worked with the pharmacy's head office, which, once presented with the evidence, launched its own internal investigation and suspended the overnight pharmacist pending the outcome. And we set a meeting. Catherine sent a letter to Daniel, in her firm's letterhead, informing him that I had retained counsel and wished to discuss my estate and medical care in a formal setting. He called me 4 times that day. I did not answer. Brianne came to the house and rang the bell and stood on my porch for 20 minutes, calling through the door that she just wanted to talk, that they were so worried about me, that I was confused and needed help. I sat in Harold's chair and I did not move, and eventually she left. That night, for the first time since my husband died, I slept all the way through until morning. The meeting was held in a conference room in a glass tower on Albert Street, downtown Ottawa, the kind of room with too bright lighting and bottled water no one drinks. Catherine sat on my left. Maureen sat on my right. Across from us were Daniel and Brianne, and a lawyer they had hired who looked more and more uncomfortable as the afternoon went on. Catherine laid out the documents one by one. The real will, the forged will, the pharmacy records, the pill bottles themselves, which had been tested by an independent lab, the bank records showing the unauthorized transfers, the emails, the trust agreement from Gatineau. Daniel's face went white, then red, then a strange empty color I had never seen on my son before. Brianne, to her credit, stopped pretending first. She went very still, and she closed her folder, and she looked at her husband and said, clearly and audibly, "I told you she would find out." Daniel looked at his wife, and then at me, and his eyes filled, and he said, Mom, it was not supposed to be like this. We were not going to hurt you. We just needed you to be manageable. Manageable. That is the word my son used. I have turned it over in my mind many nights since. The word a man uses about a problem, about an inconvenience, not about the woman who carried him, who sat up with him through every fever, who paid for his dental school with money she earned teaching grade 4 at Elmdale Public School for 31 years. Catherine stood up. She said quietly, "We will be pursuing criminal charges. I would strongly suggest your client not leave the province." And we walked out. Daniel was arrested 2 weeks later, in his own office on Laurier Avenue, in front of his colleagues. Brianne was charged the same day. The overnight pharmacist was charged separately. The family doctor surrendered his license. The case is still working through the courts, and I have been told it may take 2 years, perhaps more, and I will be a witness, which I am prepared to be. The house on Sandy Hill is mine again, fully in my name alone as Harold intended. The money has been returned to accounts only I can access. I have a new family doctor, a young woman from Manitoba who listens to me when I speak. There are things I have lost that will not come back. I have a son who I do not know if I can ever see again, and I have grandchildren, 2 of them, a boy and a girl, who are being told by their mother that their grandmother is unwell, and I do not know what I will say to them when they are old enough to ask. I have the memory of 3 years of mourning a man I thought had simply been taken by his own heart, when in truth he had been taken from me by a son we had raised together and trusted with everything. That wound does not close. It only, slowly, becomes something I can carry. But I have other things too. I have Maureen, who comes for tea on Tuesdays and who remembers Harold the way I remember him. I have Priya, who I visit at the pharmacy every second Wednesday, and whose wedding I will attend in the spring, because she asked me. I have Catherine, and the constable with the kind eyes, and a young woman in the victim services office who calls me every Friday just to check in. I have my sister in Halifax, who flew down and stayed with me for a month and did not let me be alone. I have the quiet of my own house, which I thought had been taken from me, and which, it turns out, had only been borrowed by someone who had no right to it. I am 69 years old. I was raised in a time and a country where women were told that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, that a mother's loyalty was her highest virtue. I believed that for most of my life. I do not believe it the same way anymore. I believe that love given is still love, even when it is betrayed. I believe that a mother can do everything right and still raise a child who chooses wrong. And I believe that the quiet voice in the back of your mind, the one that notices the pill is the wrong color, the one that feels a chill when your daughter-in-law smiles, the one that says something is not right here, even when everyone you trust is telling you it is fine, that voice is not confusion, and it is not grief, and it is not old age. That voice is the part of you that has been paying attention all along. Listen to it, even if no one else will, especially if no one else will. The Ottawa winter has settled in hard this year, and the sleet has turned to snow, and the path from my front door to the sidewalk needs shoveling again. I shovel it myself now. I am slower than I used to be, but I am still here. And wherever you are listening from tonight, in your own kitchen, in your own quiet house, with your own cup of tea going cold beside you, I hope you know that it is not too late to trust yourself. It never was.